It's a big night.
How come yours is so...
big night.
This is going through the internet, so there's a big lag, but we're seeing a live thing here.
Mate, I'm more live than you're live. That's
this is like at least a minute behind.
Yeah. Your Instagram's living in the past.
Yeah.
You got to fucking catch up, mate.
Just like us, actually. We're talking about the past, and Athron and myself were doing radio, 12 years ago?
It was 12 years ago.
Every Friday night, was it?
Yeah, it was every Friday night, Beat Radio.
Yeah.
Before we hit it.
I remember that day, because we were down at Nusa Dua Beach, and I said to you, well, man, how about we go down to the radio station and do a quick show? I don't know if you remember that day.
I don't remember that exact...
We're with your
definitive conversation.
Cousin.
With Patrick?
Patrick, yeah.
Photojournalist.
Yes, and so we packed up. I think it was around Boxing Day or something. Because we were down there, and we went down there. We had no idea what we were going to do next, and we just got a bottle of booze, and away we went. And we've been doing that ever since.
I remember that, man. Back then, I was not familiar with Denpasar at all either. It was just that to me was just a concrete jungle into the bowels of Bali that I had no idea how they operated or what existed where. And I remember you saying, if you haven't lived in Denpasar, you've never really lived in Bali.
Yeah, you don't really understand Bali unless you've lived in Denpasar.
Yeah, because you lived there for...
Well, I had to get a house there at one point for legal reasons. For a PMA company.
There's always something legal going on.
So they weren't giving out PMAs for Kuta, so I had to get a location in Denpasar. So actually, I rented a house right behind Akasaka.
Of course. That's a coincidence.
That.
Either they found out you lived there and they built Akasaka there accordingly, or I remember you
keeping me up at night.
Yeah, you kept them in business, mate. That's what was going on there.
Oh, good old times in Denpasar.
Akasaka, man. If you are listening to this and you recognise the name Akasaka, you've been living the dream
been around
for a long time.
Way too long.
The deep halls of Akasaka. It's it's kind of got that. As soon as you go into a conversation where you reflect on times in Bali that involved trips to Jakarta to the stadium or DJ Cafe or Scandals, Akasaka, all those words seem to just float to the top of a very disturbing, shitty bowl of off-chop soup.
I didn't really have much going for it, to tell you the truth.
It had...
How many times were you in Akasaka, proper Akasaka?
Well, to be honest, the times that I ended up in Akasaka... they were very blurry, dodgy moments in my life. But I remember it was often just with a group of friends who were all just meh, and then we wanted to just be in a crazy place where we had access to whatever we wanted to, hang out, and it would be in a karaoke room.
It's a pretty crazy place.
Yeah, it was a crazy place. So we'd just end up in a karaoke room just going nuts for 3 hours, and then we'd go into the main... There was like a main hall of kind of like, what was it called? Bosche? Is Bosche still going at all? Any capacity?
I'm not sure. I think I noticed last time I drove past that area that it was totally shut down and looked like all the signage had gone and everything.
Ah, right, okay.
So maybe it's not. I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. But,
similar kind of
But later they cut A Club, didn't they? They created A Club, and that was a bit more salubrious, you could say, a bit more normal.
Yeah.
Whereas Akasaka was like a real local kind of joint.
Yeah. I feel like those really seedy, deep, dark places that they've just slowly sort of been pushed out of the... Unless I'm just not going to those places anymore, but...
Well, absolutely. It was the police chief from... the past police chief, he's now moved on to Jakarta. I'm not sure what he's got a pretty high position in Jakarta. They seem to think he's a pretty good guy. But he totally... knocked out the underground scene in Bali, for better or for worse. It depends on which side of the fence you're on.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of good memories that have just been pushed to the wayside.
Well, everything.
Everything's
Indonesian underground has disappeared over the last 5 or 6 years.
The thing is, with that whole... anything kind of underground like that, okay, sure, you want to get rid of it because you believe it's a dangerous place for people to be, but actually it's those undergrounds that represent a massive part of society that are looking for a place to go to completely let go and express themselves, which kind of represents something that's missing, like some kind of expression that needs to be made in their lives that they don't feel like they've got a place to do that.
Well, they need a place to wind down, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like they're empty.
There's Mr. Beat there. He's Mr. Handsome. Mr. Beat. Which one?
Hang on, which one's Mr. Handsome and which one's Mr. Beat? Let's
exactly.
get some clarification, thanks.
Okay, Tyler, tell us who's Mr. Handsome and Mr. Beat.
Come on, Tyler.
I think it's both you.
Old smooth chops.
And also we got a message here from Surabaya. Opet Disco. Hello, Opet. Ciao, baby. There you go. He says, "What's up?" from Surabaya.
What's up, Surabaya?
Anybody's got a request or anything, please let us know. Anything you want. We could go run down to Akasaka and try and find you something.
Anything you want Stewie to do, just let me know.
There's the old Ali Beat. He used to he used to do the whole beat in Jakarta at one point.
Yeah, I remember those. Oh man, the beat Jakarta, that was just like we were already going at a 2-week cycle and just destroying our minds trying to keep up with clubbing and printing a magazine, and then you're like, let's do another magazine in another city.
Yeah, well, we've been doing it since 2000 or something.
Yeah.
Well, it was actually the same magazine.
Well, you did the Beat Jakarta for a while, and then you...
No, yeah, we did it in 2003, 2004. Ali was actually involved in those days too.
Maybe I have to get on your Wi-Fi, hang on.
Yeah, it's probably better.
I think it just died. Let's go.
So Ali was working for us from 2003 until the demise of the Beat Jakarta in 2016 or 17, I'm not sure when.
Right.
Jalak Beat. Yeah.
Jalak Beat is...
I better not tell everybody what the password is.
Just type it in.
You never know. I can't even see this anyway. There we go. All right, this is pretty action live radio.
What's going on out there in the big bad world?
Got a comment from Tyler again. So what's the consensus of opening a nightclub all day? Let's say lunch to dinner. Good idea.
Well, I mean, I feel like those are the clubs we were just talking about, right? The clubs that have kind of been pushed. I mean, what kind of a club is open all day?
Well, it could open at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, but I mean, generally a club that opens at 6 in the morning isn't people waking up at 5 in the morning and having a nice, healthy breakfast and then heading off to the... that happens, but...
Well, back in the day when all this wild stuff used to happen, that's what people would do. They'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go out.
I do know that people did that, but surely it was more common that people ended up there after, like at the end of a massive night of just ramping it up, and they want to continue, right?
Yeah, so but that's what I'm saying. There was there was a few people that would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, people I know, and then go to somewhere like DJ's and party on until 10 o'clock in the morning.
100%. Right? I mean, I remember being at the stadium in Jakarta and meeting girls and being like, I don't know how you... I mean, you know, any girl is going to look about 1,000 times better than I looked after a full night of being off my brain, but I'd be like, how do you actually look so together at this time of the day? And they're like, well, I just woke up 2 hours ago and had a healthy breakfast, and now I'm at the stadium because that's what I do.
Just had a shower,
they literally got up. So you're right, there were definitely people that did it, but I still feel like the majority of people that end up in a club have been going all night.
She Stadium, Tyler, I reckon.
The She Stadium. I mean, there's...
Well, why not? Like it'd be a day club. You've got a rooftop, right, in She. So you could be downstairs, right? This is pretty hardcore, right? It's a hardcore kind of party people. But you could start early in the day and go all day and then end up in sunset on the rooftop. Right?
Sure. And then you would end up back there at 6 o'clock as soon as it opened again because you'd still be going.
Everyone's tucked up in bed or not.
Yeah.
Nice and early.
Yeah.
Isn't that what they're trying to do with this pandemic? Make us healthier?
Think about how many massive buildings right now need to be utilised that aren't being utilised because they're empty due to the pandemic. I mean, we could be onto a winning formula here.
Ballrooms.
People are bored. They need something to do. You know, we're obviously ignoring every single part of the social distancing rules. But why not get them into day clubs? There's my answer.
Yeah. Well, keep your distance.
Kill the boredom. Get them into day clubs.
But isn't that what they're doing down at Finn's, for example? I don't know.
Yeah, I love the whole, you know, due to restrictions and due to a 3-metre radius needing to be around each person, we can only allow, 3,000 people through the doors this time? Like, as if 3,000 people are going to be consistently keeping a 3-metre radius from each other.
Well, speaking of which, I was down at Sevilla, the old Omnia. It's called Sevilla nowadays.
The old Omnia's turned into Sevilla? I never.
Yeah, so last Saturday for a massive event. It was as big as any summer event you could ever recall.
Yeah, right.
Don't quote me on this. Especially down
God
there.
forbid. God forbid.
But it's huge. Beautiful people everywhere. Great music.
Beautiful people.
Oh, we love a lot of beautiful people.
It's mad.
Really do it for you, right?
Like, I mean, for me, I've been living up north in a village. So
let's get to you.
So I feel like even seeing more than 3 people in one place at the same time is an insane party. But recently I was looking at Instagram stories of someone's weekend, and it was just thumping after thumping nightclub. And then I went out on a date a little while ago and ended up at what's going on there?
It's on my phone.
It's your phone. Jesus.
No, I'm gonna have to do something.
Control your settings, mate. Get your settings in check. You're out of control. Welcome to. By the way, if you on my, there we are. I've got like 2 people looking at my. If you're one of those 2 people looking at my Instagram live, I'm with DJ Stu, and we are just having a bit of a
DJ ST actually.
We're recording a radio show, and I figured I would go live on Instagram.
Yeah, we're in Canggu. We're in Broward. Yeah. Canggu, Bali.
Whilst drinking top-notch...
Oi, look at that.
Top-notch whiskey. That is in a bottle of absolute, definitely not pirate proportions.
Looks like a big bottle there. But...
look at the size of that bottle compared to my head.
Anyway.
Yeah, those days, man. Those days of just the dark clubs. I was talking to some people yesterday, friends of yours as well, and just saying how that feeling of freedom, you know, walking down a 66 nightclub on a big night and just all the looseness on the street that came with it. Sure, people were offering you drugs and they were offering you this and that and throwing all sorts of shit at you. I get it, people want to clean that shit up, but something about that also represented a much more just free feeling of just not being told what to do and not having all your rights taken away. Yeah?
Well, that's right. We've had a lot of issues with our rights over the last year.
There's been a few issues.
It seems like they've managed to be able to change the whole population overnight into these very healthy people, which is probably a good thing.
I would definitely argue that they've become healthy people, but I'd say they've become people that are told they should be healthier.
Yeah.
But it's funny
forced into this thing. What you're talking about was that even longer ago, which is probably even 10 years ago.
Absolutely. There was already a slow change from like just crackdowns upon crackdowns until you just didn't feel as easy going out and just sort of being.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because it wasn't as if there was a lot of violence or anything going on as well, you know.
At all.
Like this whole scene, the whole scene back in those days was pretty mellow.
Very, and there was
a lot of mafia and stuff around. But,
yeah, I mean, there's something to say too for recognition of people. Like there's the tribe theory, which is that any group over 150 people, you start to lose a feeling of responsibility and towards the rest of the people within the tribe. So like, you know, that's why big cities, people always fall between the cracks. They don't feel like they belong, and there's all sorts of crime and that kind of stuff. In a group of up to 150 people, you still have a sense of reputation. And when Bali was smaller, per se, like in terms of when you were going out at night and you recognised 50% of the faces in a club, you know, of all the people that are regularly out and regularly there, and the other 50% were just incoming and outgoing tourists. There's more of a sense of responsibility. So I think there was like less. Did you feel that a while ago there was much less just fights and violence and all those sorts of things?
Well, there was a lot less alcoholism too, right?
Yeah, there was just a sense of you recognise the people you're out amongst, and so it wasn't as so much.
I was probably having more violence with my girlfriends than anyone.
Well, they were having violence on you, perhaps.
Yeah, and everyone around me. But that's a long story in itself. But
That's
I get your point. But I think everything was a lot more connected. We were a lot more connected.
That's what I mean, though. It's community. It's more of a connection to the smaller group of people that you're aware exists around you.
No, but still, you go out now and you see that around you. Mm-hmm. You're not part of it. But it looks like everyone knows each other and they've known each other forever. Especially around Canggu. It's like
Canggu's a different beast. It's a beast of its own.
Yeah. So just like those African American girls yesterday that made the news in a big way.
Kristen Gray.
I'm sure they were having their own community here too, right?
Sure.
Down there in Canggu doing their thing.
They've been ripped out of it. That's a classic case of it's always better to not really go on about the good thing you've found because you end up destroying it by talking about it. I mean, that is a direct version of that, right? They were going on and on social media, right?
That's right, on Twitter.
Okay, about
a bunch of stuff, but I only had the chance of reading a few of the posts because it was taken down after all the action happened. But they were just basically saying how good life was here in Bali and how everyone should come over from the States. All these people that are suffering in the lockdowns and blah blah, and it's cheaper to live here. People are friendlier. It's a hell of a lot better than anything they're offering in the United States, which makes a lot of sense, and we all know that. But you're probably better off not telling anyone.
Yeah, it's like doing a documentary on the world's best secret island and literally giving their GPS coordinates and
a bit like what we're doing now.
How to get there. Yeah. It's horrible.
We might have a backlash on
whatever
social media as well.
But we're saying it. We're being old fuckers and we're saying it used to be good.
Yeah. No, it still is good in many ways.
Oh, of course it is.
I don't think you'd want to be anywhere else during this pandemic. That's for sure.
Yeah, I've got to say it's the feeling of. I still remember that there was a point where a lot of people were saying to me, you should go back to Australia, sort of go back to where your place of citizenship or whatever in this time. And there's something. Oh man, I'm just so glad I didn't. I mean, Bali's home, right? We've been here for years.
No,
and then as things have progressed. Wow, I honestly can't think of a place I'd rather be through this time.
But having said that too, and I'm loath to bring this up, there's 4 people I know that have died in the last week.
Yeah, that's pretty...
Not really connected.
That could be
could have been. There could be some sort of connection between all this.
We could always come up with conspiracies. Illuminati.
Well, it just makes you wonder, what is really going on. You hear about stuff and how bad it is in the press and everything else, but you don't really seem to come in contact with too much of it. But I have to admit, when
none of them
4 of your friends, or 4 people who've known over a long time die in the last week, not just here, there's also in Jakarta, you begin to wonder.
It obviously throws you. I mean, it's grief throws you enough with one person that passing, but 4 is a huge amount.
Yeah,
but
then we're in right in the middle of a pandemic. So
did any of them pass from COVID or
no? Apparently not. Right. But it might have been some sort of complication because all the beds are full or.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Like a backlash sort of situation.
Like apparently, Scotty Dobson last night passed away in Ceylon, alcohol poisoning.
Yeah.
Now I heard it was Iraq, but then just recently I heard it was limoncello. So I don't know exactly where that came from.
Jesus, that's
not our guy in a wood. Hopefully,
that's the last thing I did a couple of nights ago.
Oh really?
Sort of, limoncello.
Shots of limoncello.
Sent my restless legs into a fucking fit.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Well, maybe that was it.
No, I think it was just the sugar. I'm allergic to sugar.
It's a connection, right? Anyway, so, but having said all that, I'd say you're better off here than anywhere else. I'd hate to think those young ladies had blown it for all these people being able to get into Bali on this E224 whatever visa, which they've been getting in over the last few months, because that seemed to be our only line to tourists.
It's quite ironic that people were giving those girls shit because they were damaging Bali by showing how tourists could get into Bali.
Yeah.
When the biggest thing that Bali needs right now is tourism. This, the reason Balinese people are suffering is because of the lack of tourism. So
yeah,
it's certainly
ironic.
Yeah, it's certainly not a negative thing to try and find a way to get more tourists in here.
We definitely need more tourists, and sooner the better. But apparently, worldwide, it's worse than ever.
Yeah.
But as I've mentioned here before on this show, if you look back at the facts of, whatever facts are real or not nowadays, you're never too sure, but they reckon there was like 100 million people that died from that Spanish flu over 2 or 3 years, right? And if you equate that to the numbers of the population now, that works out to be something like 430 million people.
Ratio was.
Yeah, just percentages. And we're nowhere near that.
Which it would have been more in the favour of people to not admit how many were dying back when the Spanish flu was around, because they were just coming out of the First World War, right? And they were probably not wanting their enemies to know how much they were. That's right.
Yeah. But they reckon it was part of the reason why the First World War finished because half of the armies were being decimated by this virus.
Yeah, I hadn't actually realised the proximity of the Spanish War to the Spanish flu. The Spanish War.
That was later, 1936.
The Spanish flu to the war. Until I sort of researched and I watched some documentaries on the Spanish flu and realised, I was like, it really blew me away actually, like how devastating it would have been for any country to come out of a state of world war and dealing with the consequences of all your kids marching off and disappearing.
And everyone's complaining about how bad it is now, but just put yourself back then.
You've got to laugh when people do make that comparison, that they feel like it's probably the worst thing that's ever happened.
I had someone the other day saying to me at the Savaya show, and it's just amazingness everywhere, and they're saying, this world's so bad at the moment. And man,
well, they're sitting at a nightclub that's just going off.
It's a beach club.
Sorry.
Full of beautiful people and just amazing, right in the middle of everything.
Just smashing champagne on a cliff top, watching the sun go down. The world's fucked.
Yeah, but then I remind them, well, imagine if you're in the middle of World War II, where people are dropping bombs on each other. That's got to be worse, right? And this is stuff what's going on.
Well, one of my best friends is Serbian, and she was saying how, like, she was sort of laughing at that when she was hearing people sort of saying in the lockdown that sitting at home, still having control of all their gadgets and social media and access to whatever. And they were complaining that it was just absolute stripping away of everything, and it was the worst moments of their life. And she was remembering like having to go down into a cellar full of where they stored all their potatoes, and just like a tiny cramped couple of metre squared room with the whole family, scared of bombs dropping on the house, and just.
Well, that was just recently. Right?
Yeah, and she's like, man, this is nothing. I mean, it is what it is, right? You can't. It's never really worthwhile making comparisons, but then making claims that it's the worst thing ever is certainly a bit over the top as well.
Exactly. He's right. Anyway, so we're talking about UFOs.
The
unidentified flying objects.
Well, isn't it? I thought it was pretty funny how part of I don't know how the whole COVID bill works. Like Trump put out a COVID bill that passed like in his last sort of moments of being the president. And part of that COVID bill is that there's a 175 day or 185 day countdown to the release of all to the complete disclosure of documents by the US in regards to studying the UFO phenomena. Nothing like a phenomena. Which is pretty interesting. Like for anyone that's interested in that subject, that's a pretty huge thing. It's the one thing that I'd say I was pretty happy that he did, whatever that means. But
so who was that?
Trump. That was part of Trump's whole.
He's a UFO believer.
Well, who knows? I've never heard him say a word about it. But it was just it was slipped into the whole COVID bill of like the things that had to take place and get rolled out over the next little while. With all the COVID conditions, in there was something that has nothing to do with COVID, which is the UFO phenomena, and it was the disclosure of that. But it's interesting because the UFO phenomena, like if you go back not too long ago, it was absolutely laughed at. Like anyone that hadn't sort of looked into it or any evidence of it or looked at what it meant, you would the general person would think, oh yeah, UFOs are just something that I talked about in Spielberg movies and are just made fun of, and the only people that ever say
science fiction.
Yeah, and the only people that ever say they saw a UFO are, either crackpots or fucking meth lab dealers out in the middle of nowhere, or people on mushrooms, hippies on mushrooms. But interestingly enough, if you actually go through the whole history of the phenomena, we're talking about radar operators, Navy, military, police, and then generally the people that have overwhelming evidence of seeing UFOs outside of the people that we trust in society, like all those people in charge of society, are people that are really embarrassed to talk about it because it's been made fun of. Like they're your classic Johns and Jennies who live out in the suburbs who would never want to believe in that stuff or have never thought about it, and then they see something that they just can't explain, and it's quite embarrassing to talk about it.
So, have you had some kind of experience with UFO?
Well, I have, and that's what got me not initially interested in it, but that's why when I first started looking at other people that saw bizarre things, I took it seriously and sort of went down the rabbit hole of like, okay, what the fuck's going on here?
Right. So what did you see?
So my story is, and up until this point, like, I had never even thought about UFO phenomena as anything serious. I was someone that just thought it was a science fiction Spielberg thing. The closest I ever came to even being interested in it was being entertained by the show X-Files. It was one of my favourite shows. I fucking loved X-Files. But to me, it was like complete science fiction or whatever, fantasy world. And then living in Australia, living in Sydney, my cousin owned a property up, I think it was behind Coffs Harbour, like about a half an hour inland behind Coffs Harbour, a little place called Karamba. And he owned a one-bedroom unit up on top of a hill that was like just out in the bushland. Like you go up past all these big open farms. It bordered on Russell Crowe's property, interestingly enough. And so you go up this hill and there's just one lone little apartment, one-bedroom apartment on top of this hill with no one else around, like for, massive, there's huge properties in that area and huge areas of land. So I used to drive up there with all my music gear, and there's no phone reception, no television, no radio, nothing up there. So I'd go up with all my music gear and just spend a week to 10 days just writing music and recording music. And the stars up there are beautiful at night, incredible. So the first night I arrived at night and went straight to bed. And then the next night, I remember it was about 9:30 at night, and I was writing music, and then I thought, I haven't been out and looked at the stars tonight. So I walked outside, and I leant against my van, and I remember looking up at the stars, watching the stars, and then below, something caught my eye, and it was these lights, basically, through the trees. And I could see through the trees there was what looked like something the size of a bus with flashing lights on it, through the trees and like in the distance. And so, I'm just sort of looking at it, and my first impression, it's at night looking through the dark, so my first impression is obviously, I was like, okay, well, that must be a roadwork on a hill the same size as this hill. And I'm just seeing it, they've just turned all the roadwork lights on. And then I'm looking at it, and it sort of seems to be moving, and I'm sort of and I'm going, no, it's definitely moving, because I can see the trees of it, like there's sparse trees between me and it on the hilltop that I'm on, and so you can obviously tell by the way it's being interrupted by the trees that it's moving. And so I'm like, okay, it must actually be a bus or big trucks moving on that hill. And then there was a sudden realization that, wait, there's no hill there, that's open sky. Like during the day, that's 100% open sky. So then I'm like, holy shit, that's in the air. Whatever that is, it's in the air. And then it was sort of moving
through trees.
Yeah, through trees, but they were really sparse trees. But like you could see through them into the distance. And then I'm like, it's not that far away, and it's hovering in the air. Like that's definitely air, and that's sky, that area. and it's hovering, and then it was sort of moving back and forth and sort of changing direction, and I was like, the fuck? And then all of a sudden it just started moving away until it disappeared. And I was like, okay, so it's in the air, it's a craft, it's moving, it must be a helicopter. Okay, it's not a helicopter, it didn't make any sound, it's not a plane.
How far away is it?
It was hard to tell, because when something's sort of defined by the lights on it, it's hard to know how big those lights are and all that kind of stuff, but it appeared to be about the size of I thought it was like about the size of a bus or a big truck. And then there's just that moment that hit me. I was like, the fuck, that's kind of not explainable in my mind in any way, shape or form. So then I went, okay, I need to try and see it again. So I jumped in my van and I drove down the hill onto the road and the road went out in that direction, and I knew it went out towards open bushland. So I'm driving along, and it's sort of, I couldn't really see the sky too openly until all of a sudden I came around a bend where I could see right over I sort of had a vantage point. We could see right over the treetops for kilometres, right out to the horizon. And there it was. It was like about 800 metres. It reminded me of, like, recently I'm reminded of it when I sit on Jimbaran Beach and watch the planes come in. So it looked like a plane just as it's landing, and that sort of distance, that same size. About that size, yeah. But lights all along it. So I stopped the car and I'm like, oh my God, there it is. And I looked out and it was just sort of moving. It's like hovering, but sort of floating along, like almost like something was like floating on a magnet that's like not gripped, but sort of gently rocking side to side. And I'm watching it for a while, and then it starts doing these huge movements. Like it went from one part of the sky just like to a completely different part of the sky, like 500 meters away, and then dead stop. And it would go at an angle like up. And then I noticed it looked a little bit like it was breaking into two halves. And then it got more and more like two pieces. And then I realized it was two things, and one would stop and the other one would follow it and stop next to it. I ended up getting up onto the roof of the van and sitting there, and I'm like watching it going, this is insane. Like this is, how long ago was this? 14 years ago, and at that time there was no drones, or there was no like part of my mind that was like, oh, that's a massive bus-sized drone, because they didn't exist, I'm like looking around at properties and thinking,
who else is seeing this?
Yeah, who's seeing it? And at that time of night, all the farmers are asleep, right? So I'm really thinking, should I just drive down a driveway and wake up a farmer and get him to come out and at least witness it with me? And I'm like, a dude with a nose ring and tie-dyed pants, like a long hair, like knocking on your door in the middle of the night. He will blast the fuck out of you with a shotgun.
Talking about lights.
Yeah. So it went for a long time. It went for like 40, 45 minutes. At one point, the two crafts, or whatever they were, did like a spiral, like backwards up a tornado, up in the air. It was incredible. It was like they were playing. It was like they were literally playing with each other. And at another point, I looked out and a passenger airliner came into view on the horizon, and as soon as it started coming more into view, they blanked out, they were gone. Just ching ching, the lights were gone. I was like, shit, they've literally hidden. And this passenger airliner went all the way across the sky, which was a good contrast to what I'd been watching. It was like, that's a human passenger jet. And I thought, well, the show's over. And then when it disappeared right in the distance, bang, they came back. They were back, and they went for another 5 minutes, and then just went, like, just, I'm making a sound effect, but it was silent. They just disappeared into the distance. So I was just mind blown, because I didn't, but also I was.
And how long was this period of time?
It went for like 40, 45 minutes. It was a long time.
From where you first saw it to when you went driving down there and
Yeah, I'd say, because I remember that I walked out 9:30, 9:40 to outside, and then I got back. Yeah, it was about 45, 50, 60 minutes later. But
did you try to research or find out
if
anything was going on?
Well, I had an embarrassing moment the next day. Of course, it's the weirdest feeling to see something like that, because you immediately know you're one of the weirdos that saw something weird, and so you're aware that as soon as the words come out of your mouth, you're going to sound like a dick. But you know what I saw. You've got this thing in your head of like, I spent long enough watching that I went through every possibility. So I know it was bizarre. But the next day I thought, well, I need to know if someone else saw it. So at the risk of sounding like a complete idiot, I have to go to the police station and just ask. So I'll never forget, like, going down to the fucking Karamba local Aussie cop shop. And I walked in and I walk up and, like, there's this big front desk and there's this huge area behind the front desk and there's just sort of cops scattered around in small groups. And I just wanted one cop to walk up to me and go, yeah, I just wanted him to come up and go, hey mate, would you like a private chat about something weird? So I could go, yes, I would. But, like, of course, some cop over with another 5 cops turns around and goes, what's up, mate? And I'm like, oh, it's
UFO, mate.
Yeah, just go through and have a chat about it. And then instead of coming over, he just goes, yeah, what is it? And I'm like, oh, come here, mate. I just want to talk to someone about it. And then, like, and then it had the reverse effect. All the cops start turning around, like, and there's like 20 cops all just sort of looking at me going, what is it, mate? And then I'm like, okay, here we go. And I said, all right, guys, I know this is going to sound really weird. And I tried to blunder my way through saying, did anyone else report seeing weird lights in the sky that were definitely man-made, like mechanical things flying that didn't look like airplanes? And the more I talked, the more I just was embarrassed of how fucking idiotical I sound. And the only thing that came out of their mouths was like laughter and how good are the mushrooms this year. So, which is quite, you know, like...
they didn't lock you up there.
No, they just literally laughed me out of there, which is funny because if you think about how many people might have had similar experiences, think about any...
That wouldn't go and report it.
Yeah, and any other crime or any other thing that you would go and talk to cops about, imagine how much you would avoid it if you thought it was going to be laughed at. Like... Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So that was my experience of reporting it, which obviously...
What about news reporter? You know, like media or something? You could talk to someone in local media.
Well, what set me off... So, from that I went back to Sydney and I told 2 or 3 friends and their reactions were bad enough that I just went, I'm just not going to tell anyone about this because it's too weird and I feel stupid. So I just sort of shut my mind off from it. And it wasn't until I was living here in the Bukit that I decided I'm going to look up, because, you know, Google research, all that shit's getting bigger, and I ended up typing into Google the area and UFOs and all that kind of stuff, and I found an article in the Coffs Harbour Times, I think it was, saying those lights are back, and it talked about how other people had witnessed UFOs in that area, and I was like, fuck, vindicated. And that sent me down a rabbit hole, and I just went.
How long after the event was that?
That's like 6 years. 6 years later, yeah. And that was when I went I went hardcore on just like, okay, well, I need to know anyone that's ever seen anything like that and what does it mean. And my mind just started bending around the possibility of, well, maybe there is a UFO thing that goes on. And since then, you know, I mean, there's so much information out there, but it's very clouded by all the mocking what it is. But there's
But what happened then? So these people were reporting same lights?
Yeah, similar witnessing UFO activity.
And over how long?
I think it was just like I think it was like twice, because it said those lights are back, and I think there'd been a case where people had seen lights in the area, like UFOs. When I say lights, it sounds stupid. Like another thing the cops said was, it was probably just bushwalkers at night with torches. It's like, man, I mean, how stupid do you think I am? Like, I grew up in the bushwalking. I know what a torch in the bush looks like. You know when you're looking at a mechanically made craft floating in the air against all...
Yeah, I know. But these people that were reporting it since then, what were they reporting? Like, what sort of conclusions did they come to?
There was no conclusions. It was just... It was kind of like a fun... You know when you got your back page fun article about, oh, that's interesting. So another group of people have reported seeing UFOs in this area at that same spot, and that's when I was like, well, at least someone else saw stuff.
And you couldn't get in contact with them?
No, I haven't. No, I didn't really even feel like I needed to. It was enough for me to know that someone, because I feel like, how much more can you describe something that you don't really know what it was. But
it would be interesting to create a database of what people.
Yeah, I didn't really even.
There.
Yeah, maybe that would be a good idea, but I didn't chase that. I didn't even think about trying to contact those people. I felt vindicated that it had at least been reported, and then that just sent me down a full pathway of like looking up all these interviews and different accounts of different people in the world that have witnessed the same stuff. And the thing that blew me away the most was that once I started going down the rabbit hole was all the evidence of the actual the studies into it by the government and by the military and by the Air Force and how much and all the laws that were sort of created around it, like up until the classic Area 51 Roswell incident, UFOs were really openly discussed in the media, because this is back when air travel and airplanes weren't so advanced, so nor was the use of cameras and drones and all that kind of stuff. So the distinction between the most modern form of flight and these things that people were seeing in the sky was so vastly different that people were amazed by them, and the media was really talking about them a lot. There was a huge fleet of UFOs seen over the White House that was reported in all the papers, and the papers were starting to talk about it a lot. And then Roswell happened, and there was a downed UFO, and they announced that a UFO crashed, and we have evidence of it, and we've got all this debris, and it's being looked at and studied. And then that was the general that arrived on site being interviewed, and then the next day, all of a sudden, they changed the story. And since then, even the people in charge of that cleanup have now come out and said, we changed the story because we were told we had to. But there's no way it was a weather balloon, which we ended up changing the story to. It was absolutely of unknown origin. It was of unknown origin. It was materials that were mechanically put together, and they're of unknown origin. They're of a makeup that we can't understand.
That we don't have here.
We don't have here. We don't know how it works. And it's of far advanced technology than we've ever come across. So a lot of interesting, crazy shit. So yeah, anyway, that's
the whole universe, and when the big picture of things, where we're just this little speck in the entirety of this whole universe, and who knows where it ends or starts.
Yeah, it's so
anything is possible.
Yeah, and it's that whole it's that constant journey away from that idea that when we were really a world based where religion ruled, and let's say a time where the Catholic Church would burn you at the stake if you even thought that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. It's just moving further away to the point of realizing that we are just a tiny part of a huge picture.
Absolutely. So now, have you researched much more in this whole phenomena?
Well, I think I researched it so heavily that I kind of feel like I dug up every single possible PDF document that existed known to man to do with any case. I'll have to say, if anyone's listening and they are interested in it, I would say a really good collation of information that's come out recently is a documentary called The Phenomenon by director James Fox. That's probably the best documentary I've seen that puts together a bunch of incredible cases of eyewitness accounts of like a school in Australia in 1966 where all the children and the teachers all witnessed UFOs, and then the government came and told them to shut up. School in Africa where the same thing happened, and then lots of instances where nuclear warheads have been shut down by UFOs, and all the generals talking about it and all this kind of stuff. It's a really good documentary. It goes right into it. It's awesome.
But isn't it? It all sounds a bit wacko, though, doesn't it? With all this stuff.
Of course it sounds wacko. Like, it sounds wacko because it's absolutely just been blacklisted as a humorous, laughable subject. But
why is that, do you think?
Well, it goes into that. Like, it literally goes into all the laws that were created around it, which is that when it comes down to it, there's the technology that's used to fly these UFOs, if they've been down and they're trying to understand how they work. One, there's the theory that it's 0 point energy. It's all these methods of energy that go against our whole energy system, fossil fuels and all that kind of stuff. So it would completely break the bank on how we use energy these days. And also it's technology that could be used in terms of war, which is pretty much the whole way any government works, right? They never want to expose what they have at their disposal.
For protecting the
nations,
their people, right?
Yeah. So there's all that kind of stuff, and then there's the people aren't ready to know the truth kind of thing. So I know.
But you think if there were these extraterrestrials, they'd just sort of turn up, right? And just turn up in the middle of town. Everybody would know about it.
Yeah, I mean,
plonk.
I think
pop out of the spacecraft.
Any kind of, like, for me, any kind of theorizing on what it goes beyond what has happened and what we've seen is just a theory on like what they would do. Wouldn't they really do this? It's
kind of a theory on what we would do. Our human type behavior on that situation. That's the only way we could dream of it or think of it.
I feel like our human behavior is so war orientated that we would just like there's one really
go in and start nuking everyone.
Yeah, like there's one incredible story of a policeman that witnessed a UFO and went up to it and looked at it for quite some time before it took off, and how everyone at the time, like, it caused a real stir, and it's one of the big cases that was studied by the US government. And there's he says how everyone always used to say to him, "Why didn't you just shoot at it?" It's just to me that's just such a metaphor for like humankind. Like,
but it sounds like a 50s movie too, doesn't it?
Yeah. Which is, all this stuff's always the even what they look like and the whole concept of it. It always gets pulled into Hollywood, and then it becomes.
Well, it depends too if you arrived in the United States and the southern states versus the northern states, your reception would be pretty different, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
In the south they'd pull out a gun. In the north they'd get down on a knee.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and of course, like, why would the aliens have to turn up in the States too? Like, who knows? I mean, who knows what the fuck's going on? My personal thing is, I don't want to theorize, like, off a microphone and behind a closed door. I might like start theorizing on who they are and what it means, but all I would ever want to say I think is happening is what all the eyewitness accounts say and what I saw. There are some kind of crafts that are coming into our atmosphere and doing things that are way beyond our conventional methods, and
there's all sorts of stuff that we do not understand,
and we just don't understand, and it's trippy. It's fucking cool. It's like it's a real point of conversation.
Well, that's the thing too, is that our lives, everyone sits there thinking everything's planned out and everything's mapped out for your whole life, and it's going to be like this and this, but the reality is anything can happen at any time. That's life in general.
It's funny, I feel like up until this COVID thing, we've kind of had a period where we've been really fortunate to kind of just slip into a really an ease of lifestyle where nothing has come along and interrupted it in a major way. Where you start to think, this is
our routine, right?
Yeah, there's such a normality to what I'm doing, and I can plan for 20 years from now because that's going to be the future without a doubt. And COVID's the first thing that sort of punched us in the face and said, no, anything can change, anything can rip you out of your chosen line of work or whatever you think's going on. And
that's funny, isn't it? Because there's a lot of people that are very marginal in their lives and their lifestyles and their habits and their work and everything else. You always seem to be on the edge. I was very much the same, and my business, which was going all right, and then suddenly falls into a hole for different reasons. Just progress more than anything. So I think there's a lot of people in that situation where they're sort of just on the edge, and now it's just like throw you over the edge, and now you have to wake up and get your life back in order. So that's cool. Actually, it's very cool. I've enjoyed the last year for that reason.
It's funny because it's almost sacrilegious to say you've enjoyed it in a sense, but obviously there's always going to be people that you have to look at the good in everything, right? And I have enjoyed it in a massive sense as well, in terms of my life has been uprooted, my work's been fucked in the brain, like it's the entertainment industry's been ripped apart, and I don't have gigs, which is really hard, but I really have enjoyed being forced to learn new things and focus on a new possible way of living, and
to break the bubble you've created around you to actually see your life again.
Yeah, that's
and the possibilities. It's very easy to get into a rut and just plod along. You know, this works, so I'm just going to do this. There's nothing like getting a good shot in the backside to get yourself moving.
Yeah, and you know what? It creates new. When you do the same thing over and over, it all blends into one, and time just disappears into a vortex of one memory. It's funny, like I've got really strong memories from the age of 1 until 5, which I understand is abnormal, but I think it's not because I've got a brain that's different. It's simply because my mother we moved a lot in that time, and we had some really weird experiences in that time.
Things were changing.
Yeah, there was some really solid weird shit that happened to my family in that time. So I've got like really distinct memories of things that happened in the different places we lived because she moved around. So
yeah, exactly.
If you put that towards...
Like me, I was in the same place. You know, same little suburb, same house, probably same room.
Yeah.
You know, most of my youth.
Yeah.
So it's all a bit of a blur to me.
Yeah, there you go. You know? And your greatest batches of memories comes from your travels, from the different places you live.
That's right. When there are changes.
Yeah.
Something to remember.
Yeah, exactly.
And then your life becomes more exciting.
It marks time. So in a positive light, this COVID situation will certainly make us all remember 2020. No one's going to forget.
Hopefully for good things.
Yeah, like as if anyone in 10 years is going to go crack a 2020 joke and the other people in the room are going to go, well, what happened in 2020? Like, it's just
but look at the Spanish flu. You know, no one talked about that.
That's because they were all dead, mate.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because 100 million people dropped dead, but there's 20 million that dropped dead in the World War, but everyone's talking about the World War.
Yeah.
And they're not talking about the Spanish flu.
It's funny how
it looks to me like the Spanish flu is a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah, it's funny how little how much the war is taught and
this nationalistic pride.
Yeah, that's probably what it comes to. I guess something that was controllable to a sense by media and government stands the test of time as far as being recorded than something that was out of control like a flu. And
I guess there wasn't much recording of that first pandemic. So anyway, we had a question there earlier. What music we're going to be playing tonight?
Oh, music.
Yes. We are here with the music.
Forgot all about that. I think, is that a really polite way of saying, shut the fuck up with the UFO shit and play some tunes?
No, I've got to go check the oven as well. Where is it?
You got to check
it's from Opet Disco from Surabaya. He was asking earlier, what kind of music will you be playing tonight? And I imagine that Opet is all over the electronic music.
Right. So that's your world, mate.
So let's have a look and see what we're going to be doing tonight.
I'm guessing you've got some electro lined up.
I have, actually. We've got a show, actually. There's a pretty good one from Fernando Ferreira.
Wait, are you going to play someone else's show on our show?
Yeah, that's
how
what
it
we
works? Is that like Inception of shows?
That's we'll go from one show to the next.
Time gets slower in each show as you go deeper and deeper?
Well, it's not exactly a talk show. So he's basically... Fernando Ferreira is a bit of a progressive house DJ, producer, and he does pretty good shows. So this goes out to Opet Disco.
It's to you, Opet. Rock and roll, Surabaya.
Hope you like the progressive. Anyway, it's interesting talking to you and the UFOs. I hope...
I've officially outed myself as a freak.
It did. No, I think you're fortunate to have that experience.
It was pretty wild.
Right? Yeah. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I am glad it happened. Now, I was not so happy when it happened. But...
are you still checking, researching
constantly.
You know, that kind of
I
phenomenon.
go through waves. Yeah. I think the latest movie, The Phenomenon, sort of brought it all up again because, and I've noticed that over the last few years, you know, it's funny. I know we're about to go to music, but the funny thing is that a lot of governments are now disclosing their files and studying the UFO phenomena, and they're admitting that it's not just a joke thing that they make fun of. They're admitting that it's a real phenomena, but it's not in the it's in the media actually, but it just hasn't become a main talking point because the other things have been happening and covering up that story. But it's become very openly discussed now by governments that it's a real phenomena. It's funny how the public still hasn't really caught on to it being real.
Well, I don't know whether it's a case of that or just people don't, you know, nothing surprises anyone anymore.
Yeah,
you know, like,
that's a big part of it, for sure.
Okay, well, yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
Or I don't believe it, whatever happens.
Most people I talk to are like, absolutely, I believe that there's other life out there. So it's not really a shock to people. But I think a lot of people don't realise how much information has already been disclosed about how they're studying it and and actual cases that they're mystified by, which are really entertaining when you look at it. You're like, what the fuck, that happened?
Well, when was the last time one of these happened?
Probably the biggest recent one was the Tic Tac UFO off San Diego. There was UFO phenomena happening that was being studied for a few days, and there's extensive interviews with like Joe Rogan and all the different guys by the fighter pilots that went to look at it, and man, they just completely described this insane UFO that was submerged under the water, went up, made crazy movements across the sky, far beyond anything they could trace. Or every time they caught it on the radar, it would unlock their radar systems. So it had advanced technology. It was engaging with them. It had no sign of anything propelling the craft, but moving it.
But they don't really.
I
guess with the military and everybody gets involved in it, they're not really telling anyone what's happening, right?
Yeah, well, this guy, because they've lowered the secrecy about this stuff, this guy's just openly talked about it in interviews and everything. It's fascinating.
What was that guy's name?
Can't remember. You have to look it up. But just all you have to look up is Tic Tac UFO San Diego, and you'll find stuff.
All right, so I'll look for that on YouTube, I guess.
Yeah. All right, let's give Surabaya some beats.
Some love.
Before he literally gives us the finger for UFO chat non-stop.
Thanks for joining the show. You're on the Beat Radio. Tune in the Beat Radio Bali. Wherever, whenever.
Stu's about to go check the pork.
All over the world.
See how the oven's going.
Guten Abend to our German friends out there.
Have we finished the show? Or?
That's it.
That's it? Alright.
Oh, yeah. So,
adios, amigos.
We're going off to Fernando Ferreira. Okay. With a smooth, progressive.